Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the May 15th, 2012 special joint City Council and Redevelopment Agency meeting is called to order. This meeting has been properly noticed and posted in compliance with the open meeting law. These proceedings are being video recorded as well as presented live on KCLV Cable Channel 2 and are closed captioned for our hearing impaired viewers. Please note some customers of Cox Communication who do not have a cable box may view this meeting on digital channel 89.5. The special council meeting, as well as all other KCLV programming, may be viewed on the internet at www.lasvegasnevada.gov. The proceedings will be rebroadcast on KCLV and the web on Thursday at 8 a.m., Friday at 6 p.m., Saturday at 6 a.m., and Sunday at 8:30 p.m. For public comment related to items on the agenda, citizen participation, and public hearing items, we have available a speaker card which you may complete and submit to the city clerk. Cards are available online in the city clerk's office or at the rear of the chambers by the doors. If you do not submit a card, it does not prevent you from speaking under public comment, citizen participation, or specified public hearing items. If there's anyone present today that has a need for hearing impaired equipment, please see the city clerk's staff. If you parked in the parking garage across the street and did not receive a validation ticket as you entered chambers, please exit to your right and then see the security personnel at the entrance. Before we proceed with the agenda, would everyone please rise for the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We are on to agenda item number 4. Public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters on the agenda for action. The amount of time any single speaker is allowed may be limited. All comments made will be cross-referenced to those specific items. If anyone submitted a speaker card or who wishes to speak under this portion of the agenda, please come to the podium and state your name for the record. We would have set the time for 1 moment, but now hearing none, we will move on to item number 5. Public hearing. Possible action regarding fiscal year 2013 City of Las Vegas tentative budget and fiscal year 2013 City of Las Vegas final budget, including the 5-year capital improvement plan. Item number 6, public hearing and possible action regarding fiscal year 2013 City of Las Vegas Redevelopment Agency tentative budget and fiscal year 2013 City of Las Vegas Redevelopment Agency final budget. Number 7, R372012 for discussion and possible action to adopt by resolution the budget policies upon which the city budgets are based. Number 8, RA72012 for discussion and possible action to adopt by resolution the budget policies upon which the redevelopment agency budgets are based. Ms. Falder and Ms. Fretwell.
I'm going to start it off, Mayor,
okay,
if that's all right with you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. It's my honor to present to you the fiscal year 13 budget this afternoon. It's kind of interesting because I was reflecting in my office before I came down here that since I became city manager, we have really gone through quite a bit. And a quote came to mind for me that I really felt was pretty relevant, that, you know, once you make a decision, the universe conspires to make it happen. Ralph Waldo Emerson made that quote, and I think it's really pertinent to what we're doing here today, because about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and 2 years ago, this council made a lot of very, very, very difficult decisions. And I think it's important for us to recognize that past. We had to make severe program adjustments, severe staffing adjustments, severe compensation adjustments, like none others that I've really seen around the country when I talk to other city managers. Although many of them struggled, as we did, maybe in different ways with a variety of solutions. It's been a rough go. But we did make a decision. We made a series of decisions. And we have been working diligently to make those decisions turn our ship around. We are in a much better financial condition than we were 2 or 3 years ago. I'm really proud of that. I will tell you that that couldn't have happened but for your leadership, the hard work of our employees, the sacrifice of our employees, some very dedicated union leaders, some incredible department heads, and we've really been blessed. And that sounds kind of weird, talking about a crisis, an economic crisis, and how we've been able to endure. But that's exactly what we've done. We've been able to endure. The budget that we'll be presenting today really reflects a culmination of a lot of that hard work over the last several years. It's still a deficit budget. It's a slight deficit budget. We have been fortunate to enjoy a resurgence in sales tax and our consolidated tax performance. Thank goodness, because at the same time, our property tax continues to plummet. And we're at an extreme low point in our property tax collections, somewhere around $85 million. When I took over as city manager, we were up at around $125 million in that one category of revenue, just to kind of frame that up for you. So are things feeling better? Are they stabilizing? Absolutely. Are we managing through those structural budgetary revenue shortfalls? Yes. Are we using our reserves to do that? Yes. Is that why we have those reserves? Absolutely. We have a pretty flat budget to last year's budget. As you know, as we've briefed you before, we are trying to prepare for what we anticipate to be a fairly difficult year next year, with trying to plus up our funding for Metro, phasing in our debt payments for City Hall and some of the other debt that we still have on the books, preparing for whatever the economy brings us, to be honest, another legislative cycle, which always brings some unknowns. But nonetheless, I feel a lot more stable. I feel like our corporation, our organization is a lot more stable, such that we're able to actually begin to add back in a very small way areas where we cut significantly, and add back in areas where we had a need to expand some programming, like adding 2 new fire stations and bringing them on fully staffed. I think those are really neat things to be able to share with you today in a flat budget, that we've been able to begin to add back hours for some of our employees. Not all of them, unfortunately, but some. And hopefully over the next couple of years we'll be able to continue that trend as we can afford to. The budget before you today also supports your strategic priorities. You all have occasionally, about every 2 years, taken a step back from your day-to-day agendas and taken some time out to think, as the visionaries you are, about what you want this community to be. So we've aligned some of those resources that are being restored to the things that you told us are important in your priorities. We took great pains to do that. You see it in the capital budget that will be presented to you later on in the presentation. You'll see it in some of the program enhancements, and I use that lightly because when you're talking about a 1% year-over-year increase in your expenses, that's not a whole lot of restoration. But after a couple of years of cutback management, it feels good. Are we all the way there? No, we're not all the way there. Do we anticipate that we may have some more discussions leading into next year's budget about priorities, about restorations, about compensation strategies and all those things? Absolutely. But I think your strategic plan lays that out for us in a very effective way. So one of the things that we'll cover today is your corporate report card. Some of the corporate measures that will hold us accountable, if you will. As Chris Knight said to me once, we want to be found guilty of implementing the council's strategic plan. Well, there's only one way of being found guilty, and that's to prove that we did it. So those corporate measures are really important to ensuring you and the folks that you represent, the citizens we serve, that we are transparent and accountable in the way we live this plan that you all adopted, and that we put those good works out in the field in a way that people notice and feel we've met their needs. We may not meet all their wants, but at least we can try and meet their needs. So this afternoon, our Director of Finance, Candy Falder, our Budget and Finance Manager, Vanetta Appleyard, will be giving you a presentation about this budget in some detail. I'd be happy to help them respond to any questions that you may have. At the end of their presentation, after the conclusion of the budget presentation and the budget policy discussion, I have a presentation regarding those corporate performance measures, and then that'll wrap up the balance of the afternoon and the session today, Mayor. So with that, unless there are any particular questions for me, I will turn it over to Vanetta, who's going to start us off and going through our revenue and expenditure trends, and she'll be followed by Candace in going over the budget forecast and the actual budget plan that's before you for consideration today.
Thank you, Ms. Fretwell. Anything from council at this moment? Okay, please, Vanetta.
With this first slide, we wanted to give you a pictorial overview of just what Betsy was talking about. You can see the trending on this slide. The red represents our expenditures, and the green line represents the revenues. In the early years, 07, you could see our revenues were in excess of our expenditures, but as we went through this economic downturn, you can see that by FY09, we were pretty much balanced. But FY10, we had to dip into fund balance because we crossed that line. We were able to, you can also tell by the expenditures that's showing the cuts that we had to take. And then, and as we were able to see our revenue come back, that's why we're adding more to the budget. This slide represents the general fund revenues by category. That big blue one that says governmental revenues, that's C-Tax. C-Tax represents 51% of our general fund revenue. The next big piece of the pie is property tax, and that one represents 20%. So in total, we have we're budgeting $458 million of revenue, and you can see by those blue pie pieces that it's definitely in a couple of big buckets. This pie chart represents general fund expenditures that we're projecting for the FY13 budget. It totals $468 million. This one is done by function. Again, public safety being the big blue piece, which represents 66% of our general fund budget. And the next biggest section is the general government, which is representing 12%. So basically, our FY12 budget, we're trying to keep the revenues with the 13, excuse me, I said 12, we're back on 12. Revenues for FY13, the C-Tax is projected to increase 4.6%, with property tax at a decrease of 8%, so there's still a little balancing that we have to do there. And our budget levels are remaining flat. We were able to sustain a budget of just a slightly over 1% increase, and we're able to maintain fund balance at 18%, which is above the 12% statutory policy that we've established. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Falder.
Excuse me. Good afternoon. The next slide we have is for the budget policies. We have two sets of budget policies that I had provided you. The first is the City of Las Vegas. We have about a page and a half of policies. What I want to address here this afternoon is just the changes from what this City Council had previously authorized. The first bullet, when we brought you the tentative budget, we brought you what the departments had requested based on their scope of work that you were authorizing,
and then we discounted that by 3% across the board, all departments, based on previous year's trending cycles and the fact that we know they'll underrun some of their resources and they'll underspend some of their non-labor. But as we move toward the final budget, we realize some of those smaller departments, they never trend with vacancy factors. They have no turnover. So with the final budget, what we saw is a slight uptick in the C-tax. We elected to keep our gap the same that we filed in tentative, but taking that little bit of uptick in the consolidated tax and spread it over those smaller departments that are not going to see the underrun. We don't want to set them up for failure to begin the year, so we restated their budgets to the level that we had previously authorized. So we changed our budget policy that council-authorized positions will be funded at a discount to recognize expected vacancies and turnovers. With that being said, like I said, the smaller departments, we're not going to recognize what we don't believe will be there. So we've added that back to their budgets. We do believe the larger departments have the flexibility and will see some of those vacancies, and we'll monitor that as we go throughout the year. The second change is a correction on our internal service fund ending cash balances. Prior to this, we said we had established it as if they had to be a certain percentage. Capital internal service funds was 25% and operating was 10%. The verbiage on this should be a ceiling. It should be not to exceed. The cash balances within those internal service funds should not exceed 25% if it's a capital-based internal service fund, or 10% for the operating-based internal service funds. For the redevelopment agency, when we've been before council and you've approved the budget policies before, they were typically the same. The list we had for the City of Las Vegas was exactly what we had for the redevelopment agency. Now we're trying to tweak them a little because they are separate units, separate entities. So we took a look at the general fund ending fund balance, and we're stating that should be equal to at least 5% of operating reserves. We felt the 12% that we're maintaining for the City of Las Vegas general fund is necessary, but we do not need that much for the much smaller entity in the redevelopment agency. So we're setting that ending fund balance equal to 5% of operating revenues.
Mayor?
Please.
Would you prefer for us to wait for the presentation to be over before asking questions, or do we
I think
ask
it would be
questions?
helpful right at the point, so we have the continuity, if you would, Councilman Barlow.
Okay, then I appreciate that. Candace, I was just writing a note in relation to the RDA and the ending fund balance, because I know that over several briefings and meetings that we had as far as discussions determining whether or not the ending fund balance should be the 12% of what the City of Las Vegas general fund is based on, or should it be 10% or 5%? Help me understand the 5% and what that actual number is in dollars.
I don't have that exact number here. Let me look back on my slides for the redevelopment.
If we can go back to the previous slide.
5% would be just under, just under $1 million for the redevelopment agency. Remember, they have a much smaller staff, and they're primarily working on capital projects throughout the downtown area and the other redevelopment areas. So that would equate to approximately $1 million for the redevelopment agency.
The 5% ending fund balance would equate
5%.
to approximately $1 million?
Yes.
Then my question now would be, is that enough? And maybe that's a question that Mr. Arndt or someone, or Betsy, maybe you can chime in. I'm just trying to get an understanding, because I want to make sure that we have enough within the ending fund balance to capture any nuances that may come forward. I mean, what is the ending fund balance specifically for?
This
the
ending
budget of
fund
staff?
balance, is typically to fund ongoing operations, to make sure there's no lag in the operations. So in this case, it would be the labor and the supplies for staff.
Okay.
And this policy says at least 5% of revenues. If this council so chooses and has something coming up that they want to put something away for in fund balance in the RDA, this would allow them to do that.
Okay, so this is just a threshold.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor. Councilwoman, please.
Could I ask, is that the threshold for the RDA that's in existence right now? Or for the new one coming up, we're having some startup funds, which would be additional?
This is for the RDA that we have right now.
Okay, thank you. And then when we get to the ones for the new RDA, we'll be given an explanation of where those funds go and everything.
We will work with Mr. Bill Arndt, and we'll make sure that that's brought forward to the council.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Beers?
Thank you, Mayor. Kind of helps me to put it in perspective. This represents about 2.5 weeks of our expenses, cash on hand. 3 weeks, 2.5, 3 weeks.
Yes.
Does that sound about right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
With that, we'll go into, this slide is pretty much a review of what we brought to you at the tentative budget, talking about what we're going to do with our reserves. In particular, this was the $50 million we had set aside in the Fiscal Stabilization Fund. And as you remember, we told you that under the new GASB rules, that fiscal stabilization rolls in with the general fund, is reported as a whole unit on our comprehensive annual financial report. What this council chose to do in tentative, that we will continue through filing with the final budget, is we'll take $25 million of that for strategic capital programs. Those are the capital projects that were brought forward to you that have been approved, and we will use that $25 million there. We'll take $13.5 million and we'll use it to pay off the Neonopolis garage debt. That will then allow us the flexibility of what we need to do with that asset moving forward. We will have much greater options available to the city. We anticipate the total GASB 54 reserves to be about 21% of the general fund expenditures at the end of fiscal year 13. Unassigned, of that 21%, 15% is unassigned, and I'll speak to that in a few moments when we get to the model. The tentative budget we filed and brought to you and the final budget do not have that many differences. We did see C-Tax projection increase by $3.5 million. And I told you we used that to reset funding for those discounted positions and materials and supplies in the smaller departments. We're continuing to fund 28 new positions in the final budget, 24 in the general fund, 3 in enterprise funds, and 1 is an hourly and an internal service fund. Of those general fund positions, 4 are grant-funded positions, but what we need is the general fund needed to pay the benefits for those 4 grant-funded positions because the funding did not cover their benefits. We also are bringing on 4 part-time field operations and maintenance personnel for weekend park cleanups. As Betsy said, we're going to be opening 2 new fire stations, so there's staffing for those 2 new stations. And we'll add a communications assistant for supporting social media for the council and the city manager.
Mayor, could I ask you, I didn't quite hear what you said about cleanup of parks.
We're going to hire 4 part-time field operations personnel that are dedicated to weekend cleanups of the parks. Currently, because Mr. Hogna's staff had been reduced, they felt that they weren't getting the quality they needed on the weekends when it was the busiest, so that those personnel will help clean up parks on the weekends.
Do they think that'll help with the quality during the weeks too?
I believe that they do. They'll have staffing then that they won't have to spread as thin.
All right, thank you.
Question 2, vacancies occurring during the 2013 year. Will those automatically be refilled in this scenario?
Vacancies still will not be automatically refilled. Any vacancy will remain within the department, but that department director will still have to provide a justification to the city manager and her 4 chiefs on what the justification for filling is, what the impact is if they don't get that position filled, and then they will make the determination if that's one of the priorities within the city or if they want to put priority somewhere else.
Thank you.
Again, the model that we've brought to you several times, the first column is the projected fiscal year 12. Again, we saw a slight uptick in the C-tax, so it reduced our budget shortfall. That will now be coming in at $3.9 million. We will end fiscal year 12 with approximately 18% of unassigned fund balance. In fiscal year 13, we'll see revenues of $458 million, expenditures of $468 million, and again, we have maintained that deficit of $10.4 million to file the final budget for fiscal year 13. That will give us a projected unassigned ending fund balance of 15.4%. If you add in the assigned, the stabilization fund, and the non-spendable assets that will be in the fund balance, it's a total of 21% ending fund balance. That rolls in, that slight uptick in C-tax then rolls in to fiscal year 14. We're maintaining our same projected percentage growth for 14, but we see, as you see, we will still have a shortfall of $26.5 million, that gap for 14 that we will need to address. And we'll monitor that throughout the next year and a half as we're working towards fiscal year 14 to see what we can do in the way of expenditures based on the revenue we'll be obtaining.
Mayor.
Councilman Barlow?
Yes, Candace, how does this, I'm looking under Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, the $116 million, that's what we're projecting for our contribution to Metro. I understand that to be, the sheriff is asking for more, so how are we going to balance that or come back in for augmentation if in fact that's something that we have to address at a later date? How are we budgeting for it?
Thank you, Councilman. We have actually worked with the sheriff based on the final budget he filed. The funding we have in our fiscal year 13 budget will meet his request for fiscal year 13. We have set aside, he had another approximately $5 million in his budget for our contribution towards workman's comp unfunded liability. We've included that in this budget. A transfer out to cover that will not be given to him immediately, but that is set aside for our share of that. He is now working more towards what he's going to need for 14, but we are meeting our share of the Metropolitan Police Department's final budget for fiscal year 13. So the last item on this page, taking a look at 14, even though we're talking about the final budget, which is in the yellow column here, 14, if it all goes as we're projecting at this very moment, we would have an unassigned ending fund balance of 9%, which drops below our stated budget policies.
And just for clarification, the stated policy is 12%.
The stated policy is 12%. The fiscal year 13 capital improvement plan, we will fund in here $289 million for capital improvements within these categories. You'll see $37 million in city facilities, $67 million in parks, $83 million in road and flood. Most of these projects were previously funded by this council, and they're multi-year projects, so they still have the funding on them, and we're executing those projects. The only new money that we have put into the capital project fund is that $25 million that we took from the fiscal stabilization fund, with the exception of any money that we get from road and flood or the Regional Transportation Commission.
That's what I wanted to ask. NDOT's in here too?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Question, please. In Parks and Leisure, are these new parks? And if they are, then are we also putting in the budget enough money to maintain them?
Many of these were new parks that were previously authorized in previous years. We are not putting any new money in for new parks for fiscal year 13. This is carryover projects to complete projects that this council had already funded, many of which were funded by the SNPLMA money.
All right, if we added the parks with SNPLA or whatever, do we also include within these parks, which some are finished, some are not, right?
Correct.
For those who are not, are we going to add any funds for maintenance workers in those parks?
We have not at this time.
I think that's something we have to consider very much, because many of the new things we're doing, which I think are absolutely excellent, and I know our residents have conveyed how pleased they are, we have problems with them getting worn down quickly or not being kept up as well as they should, and it's because we're told there's not enough people to be able to do the work in maintenance, that they're at their full capacity, and as we've been adding more, they're now over their capacity.
Mayor, if I may, most of the projects that are on the list are rehabilitation projects, which would not ordinarily require you to have new staff associated with that. One thing we did do in this, Councilwoman, was to add additional part-time staff to cover the weekends and provide cleanup, as well as some maintenance activities on the weekends, since we reserve those parks out. And oftentimes that's an area where we get complaints because people rent them and they're not clean. So we've attempted to address that. My recollection is that there were no new park maintenance positions requested through the budget process, just the 4 part-timers to clean up the weekend park reservation areas.
Which we sort of needed anyway, and you have told
Right.
us before. I'm concerned about these restoration programs we've done in medians, in small parks, and places like that, and not just in Ward 1, but throughout the city, that sometimes they are falling apart more quickly because we haven't got the maintenance there. And I'm told it's because we don't have enough people that are able to do the work. That as, for example, a median takes some work also. A little park, even that one that's on Valley View, which is very low maintenance, but nonetheless, to pick up the trash at different times and, you know, to do things like that. And I just want to caution on that, because it's not just my ward. I've seen some in Ward 5, and I don't know if it was 4 or 6, but just on some of the new things we're doing that look so great and make our citizens feel proud of the city and want to be more of a part of it. As it begins to deteriorate some quickly and plants die, I just think that we have to be very careful we have enough maintenance people there, because it's not the lack of water, unless someone's turning off the water.
We'll certainly keep a really close eye on those service standards, Councilwoman, and if we start to see a degradation, I'll be sure to bring that to everybody's attention. If we need to adjust mid-course, we'll do it.
Councilwoman.
I'm going to remember that, by the way. She said,
I know how that
if we
works.
find that, we'll do it. We all heard her. Thank you. Please
Councilwoman
continue.
Vanetta has reminded me that we did, in the restatement for the uptick in the C-Tax, we did provide operations and maintenance additional funding for some of the park's maintenance to take care of some of that equipment, whether they use it for professional services to hire someone if they need to, or the materials and supplies to do those activities. This slide just gives you a little representation of some of the factors within the city for the past 4 years. Under budget, you'll see in fiscal year 10, we had a total city budget of $1.6 billion. That is now down. In 13, we will file $1.2 billion. That's a 25% decline in the total budget for the city of Las Vegas. In that same time period, we've seen a 2.8% decline in the population, and the general fund expenditures, a decline of 11.5%. Have one summary slide for the redevelopment agency to share with you. This is where we have placed in a projection $18 million for revenue. It will cost them almost $5 million for operations. They'll spend $13 million on debt service and $1.5 million on program expenditures. Their budget deficit at the end of fiscal year 13 will be $1.3 million. Their ending fund balance will be $14.8. Of that $14.8, $17.6 is reserved, and the unreserved is $2.8 million.
Okay. Candy?
Yes, sir.
Do you have a slide that would reflect what you demonstrated in the slide before this for the RDA, as far as the projection over the last 5 years?
As in this statistical slide? I do not, but I can have that compiled and give to your office.
Yes, I would like to see
To the full
that.
city council.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, that concludes the presentation from Vanetta and I, and we'll take any questions that you might have on the fiscal year 13 budget.
And items 5 and 6 are public hearing items, which I declare open. If there's anyone who wishes to speak on item 5 or 6, please come forward and state your name. Ms. Fretwell, did you want to address something else? Please come forward, state your name right up to the microphone, which hopefully will have a red button. There you go. Whoops.
Is it on now? Yes, I had a question regarding...
Would you state your name, sir,
Oh, I'm
please?
sorry. Val Sharp, LBCEA President. I have a question that I'm unclear about as far as property taxes are concerned. Since there's going to be a major move of public buildings going to the private tax roll involved with the Zappos accumulation of City Hall and all the properties around. I don't remember the name of the organization that's acquiring it and renting, who basically is Zappos' landlord. What is that going to add to our real estate tax base? It would seem to me it would add a significant number, and it would impact the city very favorably, so that while other properties might be dropping in value, that had a zero value on the tax roll, and they're not cheap buildings. They're worth multi-millions of dollars. So I would like to know how that was calculated into the budgetary process.
Mark, would you
I would
please
like
respond?
to, sure. If my memory serves me right, and Candy can correct me, but there were two
Excuse me,
components.
would you mind coming up here? Would you mind? I'm sorry, Mr. Vincent, but if you'd do that, appreciate it. Thank you.
I got it right this time. Last time I stumbled over that. Two components of the Zappos arrangement was, for the record, Mark Vincent, Chief Financial Officer. Two components. One was the increase in property tax, as Mr. Sharp indicated, and the other one was the repayment on in the initial years, the interest-only payment on the debt. Both of those are in the budget going towards the future, the current and future lease payments for the City Hall. Combined, those two combined, if my memory was right, are close to $700,000. My memory was property taxes around $350, and interest earnings was maybe around $400,000. So together it was about $750. But all that, at your direction, is going towards the lease payment for the new City Hall.
Okay, is there a more appropriate time when we can ask about, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but we wanted to talk about how the 40-hour work week is going to be addressed. Is this the appropriate time, or is that going to come
I
up
wouldn't
at a
say
different
here,
point in time?
later on this. But it's not on.
Mayor,
Yes.
within the budget that's presented before you, there is no restoration of the 40-hour work week for all the CEA employees. There's some limited restoration in a couple of work units, as I described earlier in my presentation. We have built in our required bargaining obligations, things that we've already agreed to. So steps will restart in January, and we anticipate in the 2014 budget that COLAs would restart in 2014. You know, obviously, we've still got a big deficit in 14 that we're projecting right now, and we'll continue to work to minimize that over the course of the next fiscal year. But at this point, that has not built any hours restoration beyond some limited hours restorations for small units. There are no additional restorations and hours included in this budget.
Thank you, Ms. Freth. Well, Mr. Sharp, did you want to respond on
Yes,
that?
I do. There's an old joke about there's three kinds of liars: damn liars, and statisticians. And I think the problem that we have, particularly with the 14, I'll speak to that immediately, we have no idea what 2014 is going to be like. So to me, that's kind of like a wild guess. But talking specifically about city obligations, I have here a chart that I'd like to have, I don't know who gets it to the council people. This was sent out in a newsletter in December. It's based upon a chart that was provided by Mark Vincent. This chart also grew fame with John Ralston's face-to-face. It was used when Betsy was making her presentation. When I saw the chart, I immediately had a question. I said, this doesn't make sense to me. What was the basis behind the chart? So Mark Vincent met with me, my vice president, who's in the audience, and our secretary at the table at the CEA office. He showed us what the numbers were, how the chart was compiled. I showed him what I believed were the errors in the chart in how it was compiled. He stated that he agreed with my conclusion and that he would draft a new chart, which is more similar to what you see on the bottom. The blue graph is what I put together. The top graph is what Mark Vincent showed. What's the difference? Well, first of all, we never got a COLA. That was included in the figure. Second of all, it showed step increases, which had been stopped prior to that time, so a half a year of step increases shouldn't have been on the chart, but it was charged with the full amount. So basically, the chart distorted the picture of increase that the CEA employees received. And when Betsy said, oh, that's complex, it's a complicated story, so let me get with you and explain this, we met with Betsy in January, where she was going to explain the complexity of the details of the chart. She didn't bring the chart, she didn't bring documentation, and she basically didn't convince me that my conclusion is in error. So I have a problem when we start throwing out all these numbers about, hey, what about us? We gave up $22.5 million in postponements and cuts. We think we have done more than our fair share. Not only that, but we actually gave up a future benefit that will not be counted for 10 years. But in 10 years, we gave up an additional $5 million. It's called longevity. All of our current employees receive it. Any new employees don't get it. Right now, the city is paying out $5 million in longevity. 10 years from now, when those new employees hit the time when they'd be collecting it, they get nothing. So that's an additional benefit, an additional savings to the city. All we're asking for is fair treatment back to us for the sacrifices that we made because of the terrible times that were evident 2 years ago. I mean, we were worried about the city just as much as Betsy was worried about the city. Well, times are better. The obligation is there. There is absolutely no reason why. She just mentioned the budget is $1.2 billion. You can't find $2 million in that budget to make us whole from January to June 2013. $2 million? Let's get real. She's already budgeted $1 million for bonuses, subject to negotiation, so nothing can be done with it until we negotiate it. So that could be added to the $3 million, not billion, just $3 million to bring our employees back to 40 hours. And Lois, that goes a long way to solving your problem. Now they're working a full 40-hour work week. Now you've got more services. If you operated the city the way the employees would like to see it, you'd have Monday through Thursday, Tuesday through Friday, and to cover leisure services, you could do a Wednesday through Saturday, 40-hour work week. You'd have full coverage. You'd have a couple of hours on each day where residents and citizens, people who have concerns and want to get a hold of the city, could make those calls after they get off work or before they go to work. All we want is fair treatment. We acted in good faith. We would like to see the city act in good faith. I know that you, as city council people, are Betsy's boss. You can direct her how you want to see things happen. Because she said to me, Val, I didn't budget for it. And I said, Betsy, you got a problem. no, Val, you've got a problem. And I thought, I don't control a budget. How is it my problem? It affects your employees. I says, you're right. That's why you have a problem, Betsy. You need to put the money back into the budget to cover the situation that was created when we did what we did in our effort to help the city stay stable. You know, we're the guys that do all the work. Sweep the streets, fix the traffic lights, repair the signs. We do everything that makes this city hum. It's a great city because we've got great employees putting forth great effort to see to it stays afloat. The biggest problem we now have is people working so hard to cover for those who are missing in action on a RIF list someplace that they're actually having problems themselves because they're trying to cover for 2 or 3 people. Because they're so dedicated, because they're so committed. And all we want to do is get a fair share back. Bring some people back. There's still about 60 people on the RIF list. Put in the 40 hours starting in January. Goes a long ways to making this city a better place.
Thank you, Val. We do appreciate our employees. You know that.
I know you do, that's for sure.
We all do, I can tell you, because we do speak to that. But thank you. Was there any other comment, Ms. Fretwell or Mr. Vincent, you cared to make back?
I really will reserve my comments for later. I don't necessarily agree with the way some of these conversations have been reflected. I don't think it's really appropriate for this time to get into that. And I understand exactly where Val's coming from. We all want to be back to normal. We all want to have restoration. We all do. That is what we are working so hard to do. We just aren't quite there yet. Our revenues are still flat. They're the exact amount that we got last year. Nothing changed on the revenue side. We're spending down reserves in order to facilitate some capital projects and a few minor program restorations where we cut too much. And we have hired people back. We've hired over 50 people back off of that RIF list. So I don't, I'm not sure it'll be very productive to go much further than that, but I wish more than anything that I was able to stand up here and present to you a budget that included the restoration of those hours, that we weren't in fierce negotiations with IFF right now, that we were able to just make things start humming again. We're just not quite there yet, and it's going to take patience, trust, communication, and understanding. And I know that's hard to do when a lot of people have gone without for quite a while because our employees stepped up first, and I would argue maybe more than lots others have. And everybody gave in different ways. Our marshals gave incredibly. I'm sure they would like some things back. Our corrections officers gave. They would like some things back. CEA gave. They would like things back. Our firefighters gave. I'm sure they'd like some things back. We're just not quite there yet. And I just urge patience. So with that, Mayor, I think I've said enough.
Thank you. And Val, just so that you know, we do believe in our staff. We do want this to happen, but it has to be at the right time and with the proper allocations when they're there, hopefully sooner rather than later. And there are many scenarios that are suggested, but I hear your passion. I know we all do, and we believe that it is because of what you and CEA are doing that makes it work. So we do know it and appreciate your coming forward to speak about it so passionately, and we believe in it. So hopefully soon we'll get there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Thank you for coming forward.
Sure, you bet.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Councilwoman?
I know, Betsy, that, as I recall anyway, it was CEA who stepped up first, wasn't it, last time? And the other thing I do know for sure, I remember clearly, is that you said maybe just a few weeks ago that you were going to try very, very hard to give back because they had given so much to us in the unions. In other words, they had given up so much already, you thought it was time if we possibly could. I also feel that maybe there's a way that we could do a partial return of those hours. If we can't do 2 hours all at once, maybe it's a partial hour so that we can gradually move back. Maybe that won't work, I don't know. I know the problems you face, and I understand very much what Val is saying also. And I've seen the deterioration in some of the work done. I'm not knocking anybody because I probably wouldn't be able to do as much either if I were working for 2 or 3 people. But I've seen it, number one, and I've heard the concerns with people where the morale is very low. So if there's a possibility you could look into even beginning to give back those 2 hours, that's all I'm asking. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Ross.
Thank you, Mayor. And Val, just for not only your benefit, but for the employees of this city, we get it. I mean, Betsy's right on the mark when she stands here and says, I wish we could restore hours. I wish we could restore services. I spent Saturday in one of our great city parks in Centennial Hills and was embarrassed because the grass was overgrown and the garbage was everywhere. It was challenging for me because I want those services restored. Councilwoman, I'm with you in regards to trying to get the services restored. That would solve a lot of the problems that Councilwoman's having, that probably all of us are having in all of our respective wards. I'm not sure we're there yet, and I want to be there. I'm looking at these numbers, Val. You guys sat in my office. I'm not sure we are there yet. When you come to us as a city manager, Betsy, and say to this board and this council that we're spending down reserves, that's not what I want to hear. I want to hear that we're in the black, we're doing good, revenues are looking good, expenditures are down, we can restore hours to the employees, we can restore all the other things to the other collective bargaining units that we deal with in the city of Las Vegas, because everybody gave up a little. Absolutely, Val. Kudos to your team and your organization because you stepped up first. And you feel what we feel. You are the face of this city, as are our men and women in uniform. You're the face in a park, on the streets, fixing a traffic signal. That's us. And we understand that. And I want you to know that. We feel your pain. And I wish there was more we could do about it. And I'm not sure, as much as I want to, say, Betsy, give them their hours back. Restore services. Because I'm going to be the first one to say that when I think it's time. And I'm just not there, and I feel bad about that. I don't know what else I can do.
Well, I think the problem that I have,
Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman, is that when times were really tough and they needed to check their reserves and make sure they didn't violate, requirements for proper bond ratings and so on, 12% was the number. Now they're moving it up to 16% because of some accounting expectations that perhaps weren't there before. We're looking at that and saying, okay, I understand, but why does it have to be 16? Why not 14%? Does that give us the $2 million that we need to get our 40-hour work week back? I'm not a forensic accountant. I have enough accounting to sit for the CPA exam if I so desired to do so. So I know a little bit about numbers. But I'm not going to pull the city's books apart because you've got all these different funds that things have to be paid out of and can't be paid out of in others. We understand that. But the problem is, it's like the rules keep changing to benefit the city, and we don't get a break.
Councilman?
And Val, I'm not going to disagree with you, and I don't want to say the rules have been changing, because what I've seen as a council member on this council is that we've got to make sure our city's in a good place financially. Of all of the municipalities in the state, and I say this in the capacity as president of the Nevada League of Cities, we are doing the very best we possibly can of any other municipality in this state, especially in southern Nevada. I mean, the bar is set because the city of Las Vegas sets it. And you know me, I talk to people on the ground. I talk to those people cleaning the parks, sweeping the streets, the men and women in uniform. And I ask them, how do you think we're doing? What are you missing? And most of them tell me this, if not all of them. I've never heard one say otherwise. I'm just thankful to be here. I love the city of Las Vegas. This is my home, and this is where I'm going to continue to be. You know that, because your members tell you the same dang thing, because you feel it in your own heart. And I think that's significant. We're going to do that. We're doing the very best we possibly can with the tools we've been given, and we're going to continue to do that. And I think this council is going to continue to support the men and women that help support this city. We're not going to leave you out there hanging. That's all we ask. Thanks. Thank you.
And I'd just finally add to that, that I think the key that we're looking for here is that when we go back to a 40-hour work week, which I hope we will be able to do, that it's sustainable. And so because we're on this sort of rocky road coming out of this economy, it looks good, but we're not quite there. But as soon, I know our belief is as soon as we can, we will, but we want to make sure it's there and sustainable going forward. So thank you. Councilman Barlow.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. Val, you and I had long conversations in regards to the topic you brought forward today. But in addition to that, the employees that I've spoken to as well had mixed emotions in regards to whether it be the 5-day or the 4-day. What are you hearing from your colleagues as it relates to the 40-hour, but more so specifically the 5-day versus the 4-day?
We've done kind of an informal survey. I'm glad that you asked that, Ricky. We've gotten about 40 responses specifically because we asked them to contact us by email. About under 50 people have responded in favor of the 40-hour work week. Primarily, there's probably only been 3 of them that have said going back to a 5-day work week. They have gotten used to the 40-hour, 10-day work schedule. I know that in dealing with some of the dealings that I had when I was a license officer before I was involved full-time at the CEA, that because North Las Vegas and Henderson were also on a 410s, that a lot of businesses that do business with the city, i.e. in the planning and development in those areas, they have their people on 410s because they can't do business in Henderson or North Las Vegas, so they kind of have just adapted to that. So the 410 work schedule is the overwhelming favorite of the city employees. But to speak to Carolyn's concern, you could still have a 5-day open work with the city and just put people on a Monday through Thursday, Tuesday through Friday. You could still have 5-day coverage if you absolutely had to have it, and you would have a very, very highly elevated in morale workforce because they're used to it, they've planned for it, and they've been on it for over a year. So if you're asking what we're hearing from our people, they want to go to 410s. I was not in favor of a 410 work week. I thought, too long for me. And I'll tell you, I'm on it. I love it. I absolutely love it. I had 980s before, every other Monday. It was great. 410s, beautiful. I mean, I think it's the wave of the future. I really do. I think that's the way people are going to do. They're going to turn more things. The county will be the last dog hung when it happens. But I can see us being a pioneer in that area, just like Betsy mentioned. We set the bar. And I think that's an opportunity for this council to be forward-thinking in this wonderful, beautiful city hall, move into the future and put your people on 410s. They'll love it. They'll appreciate it.
Thank you for your
Thank
input.
you.
Anyone else wishing to be heard in the public hearing portion? Councilman Beers.
Thank you. I was wondering if I could ask the manager to put together a reconciliation of the 2 sets of numbers here for me
Absolutely.
after we get this all done and tied up and sent off to the state, of course.
Sure, no problem.
Thank
We'd be
you.
happy to do that.
Councilman Coffin?
Thank you, Mayor. The issue that Val raises, I think, is legitimate on the question of what kind of reserve is necessary. And I can't recall specifically what reserve I'm used to in the state government is much less than what we're maintaining, I think. And but of course, the state has a greater authority to tax, to adjust if it has to, and it also doesn't have collective bargaining. On the other hand, the collective bargaining creates stability, so you don't have massive changes in your salary expense, and because the city relies more heavily on property tax and a blend, kind of a mix master of all the taxes in the C-tax, you actually have more stability in tax revenues at the city, any government, local government, than you do at the state. But we used a considerably lower ending fund balance as our reserve, I think, at the state. So it becomes a question that is an arguable thing. And I think it's too late to change it for this particular fiscal year, but I want to know, I really believe we could debate this and maybe reduce that amount. But that doesn't necessarily mean it would be a restoration of salaries or anything like that. But services have been denied, so we have to find out where we are in that regard. Anyway, Manager, don't you think we've had a high reserve here, even in this tough time?
I think we've had the ability through cost containment and a variety of council directions in our various decision-making sessions about budget that we've been able to sustain a healthy fund balance. I'm glad we did. Had we continued along the route we might have taken, had we started spending reserves early, I can assure you we would not be having this conversation today. We would be cutting our budget at least by $10 million had we done that, and probably a lot more had we used those reserves on operations. So I think it's been prudent. I think it's been conservative, and I think it's worked to our advantage. I will say this, let's not forget that one of the key reasons that we keep a healthy fund balance, level of reserves, is to convince bond raters that we're a worthy investment. And we got a little tiny bit of a wake-up call a few weeks ago, because we put out our forecast, the one that Candace showed to you earlier, that showed that we would be dropping our fund balance down to 10% next year, unreserved. Actually, nearly 9%. Upon them seeing that, they gave us a negative outlook on our bond rating. They sustained our AA, which is, I'm very proud of that. But they sent us a warning shot that if you let this thing go down, this fund balance go down, and you don't effectively show the management tools in place to contain costs or rebuild revenues, we're going to downgrade you. Mark will tell you that a negative outlook is a precursor to a downgrade. I'm not sure that's where we want to be. Fortunately, the two other rating agencies left us at a AA with a stable outlook. So 2 out of the 3 agreed with us.
I'm familiar with
One
Fitch.
disagreed.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the point is that I can appreciate exactly what you're saying, Councilman. Totally happy to have a conversation about adequate fund balance. I do know that people are probably a little confused because there is a new Governmental Accounting Standards Board reporting criteria that we shared with you back in December when we brought the final audited numbers to you that showed basically an all-in reserve number. And we felt, and based on those GASB guidelines, that all-in number should be 20%, not 16, not 18, not 10, not 8, not 4, 20. And so what we brought before you is a plan that keeps us in that frame for next year. But if we were to continue spending the way we anticipate we may need to in 14 without additional revenue recovery, we will be well below that GASB standard at that time. So I just caution you, we're not out of the woods yet. It feels better. There's private sector recovery. That's going to hopefully continue. But remember, flip back a few pages. In 2007, the city of Las Vegas just began to start to feel the revenue impacts of the recession that had been grabbing a hold of the private sector in 2006 and held on tight until 2008. We didn't lose all of our revenue until 2009. We are 2 years behind the private sector. 2 years. We're 1 year into that right now. 1 year. So we got to get through this next year. We need to see where we land with our revenue production. We need to see where we land with legislative adjustments. Hopefully, we're going to be having a different conversation next year. Hopefully we have healthy reserves.
Okay.
and we get to the 5, I mean, our goal, your stated goal, is to have 2 to 5% more revenue than expenses. We are not there yet.
I really sent you an easy one to hit out of the park.
Did I do it?
I want my time back here.
Sorry, Councilman, but I think it's important to consider.
Yeah, well, I have a lot of things that are good things to say about this budget process so far, and I'll reserve comments until just before the vote, Mayor. But I do want to say that I think amongst the many things that we started going over the last 9, 10 months, which I was happy to participate in the creation of, I think going forward, after this vote today, I want to add a continuous discussion about what a healthy reserve should be, so that we make sure that because we are denying services. I mean, let's forget about the pay thing. We are not providing all the services that we should be. We're doing, I guess, the best we can. But the point is that we got to figure out and start stacking the priorities of what we're going to restore as we can. And in that respect, you got to look at your ending fund balance and see what you need. It could be, you're absolutely right. We might not even be at the bottom yet. We don't know for sure. But in the meantime, as we get more sophisticated in our budgeting before next year, then I think the discussion of what a sensible ending fund balance should be is part of the mix, instead of just being afraid. Thank you, Your Honor.
And Mr. Vincent, did you have another comment that you wish to
Just
add?
a couple of final comments on the reserve issue. We were asked at one point, what do the rating agencies expect for a reserve level of a city our size as a AA? And what our research found was they expect about 20%. Now, that's the only thing to look at, obviously. They look at a whole plethora of things, but that was what they told us. And so that's part of an answer, and we need to obviously continue the dialogue. The other point I want to make is that reserves, even at the state level, the reserves are really one-time monies, and they should be used for one-time items, which is what we're doing in this budget today. And I just remind everybody that we had a $4 million deficit in 12. We actually had a deficit in 11 were it not for the $17 million transfer in one-time money. We're projected to have a $10 million plus deficit in 13. You're still running a deficit. So I don't know that it makes sense when you're not running at least even to draw down reserves further to support services. That would be an issue that I would think most financial chief financial officers, finance directors, GFOA, general accounting rules would tell you that you shouldn't use reserves for ongoing operations. I just point that out to you as well.
Thank you. I would like to add at this point, before I do close public hearing, you know, listening to LCEA, I know that one of the things that has concerned me always is that we aren't serving the public on Friday. And I'd like to ask, just as a point of investigation going forward for future years, that you look at the concept of what are the costs to the city, what would happen if we did have that rotating, you know, a Monday through Thursday, a Tuesday through Friday, just to come back, just looking at the costs of that once we're stable and once we are well-funded. I understand absolutely where we are in this cycle, and think just looking at the dollars and what you've done in working on this budget, we are in a very iffy position, and hopefully going forward the income to the state and to our community will be better, and then this will become a no-brainer. But I love that idea of being able to service our community 5 days a week at least. So any other questions here? Okay, I will close the public hearing and we will move on. Is there a motion? We're going to take these separately on item 5.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll make a motion to pass item number 5.
There's a motion. Please vote, everyone. Oh, okay. Hold off discussion, please.
Thank you. I'm still from that old environment.
That's all right.
Which I really think this is when you should have your discussion. The hearing is for questions and answers, and then debate in the discussion period.
Please continue.
Maybe not be any debate.
Nope, I moved too quickly. Continue, please.
Thank you.
Council.
Thank you, Honor. We've had a good presentation. To some people, it might seem brief because you're talking about $1 billion here and $500 million there, and it's not something you lightly handle in a one-hour presentation. But in fact, a lot of work has gone into this, and the council has participated to a great degree. In fact, more than usual, I understand. When I came aboard last July, there was a lot less transparency in the budgeting process, and I asked my colleagues and our managers if we could do more to open up the process that is culminating in a vote today. So the last 9 months have seen progress in many things, and if anybody, for example, wants to know how the city spends its money, because that's the justification ultimately for all of this, is how you spend it. The amount's important, but it's how you spend it that counts in the people's minds. And I think if anybody has a quarrel, they know where to go to find the answers to their questions, because, you know, since we created our new page on our website, which is not just simply a look at, like the budget that you see in front of you today, maybe 100 pages, but rather it's a budget that changes. It's a dynamic budget. It started in January, I believe, but it took 4 months to get it going. But now we have a budget page on our homepage that shows the public everything that's going on. It shows you, I'm sure it probably gives heartburn to a lot of our employees, but it shows how much they make and how much benefits they are paid. Previously, well, currently, a privately funded organization in the state puts out these things on the website. But frankly, it's not all that clear on that website. They're providing a good public service, but now we're doing a better job than they are because we are actually putting it all out there. And I know that it makes some of our employees feel uncomfortable to have their name on a website with their salary and how much we spend on their benefits and so on, and who they work for and what department they work for, but that was never there before. Last year, this current fiscal year, we had a lot of meetings to talk about the budgets and the components of the budgets. Most of them were public meetings, either in this room or in a hearing room somewhere, if not on the floor. So I really think that a lot more has gone into the construction of this budget than had gone in before. And maybe it's been cyclical, Your Honor, depending on the interests of members of a council, but I'm impressed with this, but I think we need to do more. We've gone a long way to start, in my opinion, a method of looking at this biggest vote of the year for anybody, should be. So we need more open meetings on the budget and on the sequence of building the budget. So we did not have any meetings that actually took a direct look at how any one department functions and how it works. Now, granted that 85, 87% of our budget is salary, and that is governed by the contracts. So one would say, well, then if you're only going to fight over 13%, how much should you spend? How much time should you spend on it? But I've always believed that the public has more confidence in us if they believe that we're looking after the pennies, because it does translate into dollars. And so there's many millions there that can be looked at and not questioned from the standpoint of anything I think might be inappropriate. As far as I know, it's appropriate because it's been thinned down pretty good. There are things that I asked for that are in this process, and I appreciate the city manager and her staff and my colleagues for approving all these things. When I first came aboard, I also asked for us to start exploring on the wage side a different method of calculating our work hours for our firefighters. And I remember that in recent discussions there have been more people interested in exploring things other than the 24-hour shift as a means of employing our firefighters. And I want to see more work done on that. Granted, that becomes a sensitive topic with our friends in the local, but I think that they certainly can't object to having an open discussion on whether or not this makes sense. 24 hours means a tremendous charge for overtime and a tremendous charge for sick leave if it happens. And we are not abusing sick leave and overtime in our firefighters. We do not have that problem, thanks to rules set up by council members who preceded me. So, with the exception of a few votes that I've differed with the majority of the council on, I really believe that this council is moving in the right direction, and I think the partnership between management and the council is a good one, and I hope that we continue this. And I think it becomes, I really hope it becomes a little less friendly, because I want to push you just a little bit here. If we're getting too comfortable with you, I think that's probably a bad thing. So I'll see if I can get the blood moving in the council and the manager before too much longer. In any event, Your Honor, I'm going to support the motion whenever it's made, or whoever made it, and with enthusiasm, because I know that we're doing a better job, and I hope that this is just the beginning of what we're doing. Trust me, I mean, anybody that's watching this program, we don't get calls from people asking us what we're doing. We should be, maybe, but if they just look at the computer and they go in, drill in, they find out everything now in a budget that's changing every month. So for that, I'm very appreciative of all of the folks in the finance staff, because that was work. It's yours again, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman. And there was a motion made by Mayor Pro Tem in favor, and if you would please vote if you have not. And please post. Thank you. Item number 5 carries. Now move on to item number 6.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to pass agenda item number 6.
Thank you. Any discussion here? Your microphone's on, Councilman. Okay, it was a sign. Okay, there's a motion. Please vote. And please post. That motion carries also. Thank you. And on to item number 7.
Motion is to approve item number 7.
Any comments here? There's a motion. Please vote. Please post. That also carries. Thank you very much. Thank you both very much. And we will move on to item number 9. Excuse me. Did I not do that? No, I didn't. Goodness. I'm moving on to item number 8. I can always try and sneak things by.
Not with me.
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion to approve item number 8.
Thank you. Any discussion here? Hearing none, let's vote on item number 8, and please post. And that also carries. Thank you. We will move on to item number 9 at this point. This is a report for possible action regarding the City of Las Vegas Performance Scorecard. This is in reference to all wards. Ms. Fretwell, the floor is yours.
Thank you. One of the things that we've been working towards, and I referenced in my earlier comments, is implementation of your strategic plan. And so what I want to do really quickly is just talk about some of the things that we do to support that implementation and how we measure progress. So back in March, you approved 6 priorities. They're on your screen. I won't read them to you. You all are very well aware of the components, I believe. Within that plan, the various goal statements within each of these priority areas, and the kinds of things that we're attempting to achieve under your direction. So if anybody needs that, I'd be happy to give them to the clerk. I did bring extras just in case you don't have it with you. But I don't plan to dwell on the components of those strategies and those focus areas that we're working on as a result of the approved budget. Why are performance indicators important? As I mentioned earlier, you really, at the end of the day, you want to have a measuring stick. You want to know how you're performing. So sometimes numbers tell a story. Your metrics tell a story. It helps you as a manager, it helps you as a leader really make a good decision about what's fact versus what you think, what your gut tells you. And that's what's really important about these performance indicators. I could sit here and tell you all day long, we're doing a really good job. You pick the area, X, Y, or Z. I would certainly hope that you might want to look back across the dais to me and say, how do you know, Betsy? Well, key performance indicators are the how you know answer. And it also helps us as we begin to focus in on our overall performance. These performance measures are not only incorporated in your corporate strategic plan, but they're integrated into each departmental plan, because each department has a strategic plan that addresses your strategic priorities as well as some of the key operational issues that they need to address. But it also is included in our executive performance evaluations, including my own. So what we're basically establishing is a scorecard. I'm not sure what's happening here on our presentation, but we're attempting to set up a scorecard. So each of those 6 priorities has an index of measures. What we're trying to do is weight each of those measures so that each priority area has 100% that could be attained. And then what we will do is we will evaluate as the target is achieved for each measure. The full weighting is counted as points. So at the end of the day, you'll be able to see how close we're performing to that 100% in each of these measurement areas. So for instance, as we move through this, I'm going to just show you the weighting by category of measure. If you want me to get into the specific measures, I'd be happy to. Those are all distributed to you last week. I think we might put everybody in the whole planet asleep if I put them all up here, and it would certainly take more time, I know, than we have allocated this afternoon. But I'm happy to respond to any questions. But you can see here that in the area of thriving and sustainable business, we have a heavy weight to job creation. This is something that the council's been very focused in on over the last 4 years or so. It's a continued heavy focus, as are some other things, like improving our development processes, improving our business licenses, meaning net new businesses in this town, in our city, and having a great downtown. So those are the kinds of things that we would be measured against a year from now. In the priority of health and safe and healthy city, which is where most of our public safety focus lies, as well as our physical infrastructure. How do we design a city that's safe for people to live in? We have a heavy weighting towards life safety in this category. The other thing that we're focusing in on here primarily is infrastructure. There's a heavy investment in infrastructure in your capital plan as approved today to rehabilitate sidewalks, to rehabilitate streets and roadways and parks. That's all a part of making sure that that initial investment that we made in those pieces of infrastructure that are the backbone of our community stay in good working condition. Obviously, one of the things that we've been focusing in on and was a big part of the conversation earlier is sustaining and restoring services. So in this area, that's overweighted. But we recognize that fair and competitive wages and benefits are really important to making sure that we're providing the best quality service we can. We also recognize that that's really important and is a piece and part of the service restoration that we're trying to get to. Meanwhile, we don't want to forget about our unfunded benefits and liabilities. I know Councilman Coffin referred to some of the series that we had leading up to the budget adoption today, of a series of conversations and topics that we brought forward for extensive discussion. One of those pieces of the puzzle was this unfunded infrastructure and benefit liabilities and how we continue to wrestle with that. We can't forget the customer. So we want to make sure that our service delivery is solid and that we're continuously improving it and that we have information that's accessible. Another piece of that puzzle is ensuring that our citizens are part of the picture, that they engage in a meaningful way with us as a city. Organizational excellence is another key area. This is something that was really critical to our employees. You know, we used an effort over the fall where every employee had an opportunity to participate in roundtable discussions about these priorities. This was a very important area to each and every one of them. So you can see trust, empowerment. Mayor, I can't even tell you, I don't think there's a day that I don't hear come out of your direction. Communicate, 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 communicate. We recognize that that's critically important. But in addition to that, we need to make sure that our employees are trained up, that they're getting the training, the certification, the education that they need We can't leave that behind. And when they're doing a great job, let's recognize it. Let's recognize it. So what do we do next? These measures, should you approve them today, will be incorporated into the departmental strategic plans and into next year's executive performance evaluations. We will develop a corporate report card. You and Councilman Coffin may remember when you first came on board, we finished our first corporate report card. We provided it to you in your orientation. We do that corporate report card every 2 years. We want to change up our mechanism to do that corporate report card, though, this time. I'd like to convene an independent group of experts to go through all of those measures, to validate them, to help us design the report card so that there's additional objectivity brought to bear in that process. So that way we'll have some outside experts helping us so that when we present that information, whether you present it in speeches that you might give to community groups, or we present it to business groups or other organizations that may be interested, or just taxpayers in your town hall meetings, that you can say, look, these numbers have been validated by an outside group. I think that's really important to take it to the next level. And that's all I have. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the specific measures if you'd like. If you've got a concern about the way we've weighted these things, happy to entertain that discussion. But this is the product of our work teams, our groups that have presented to you on these priority areas, and we're happy to get your feedback.
Right on, thank you. And Councilman Barlow.
Thank you, Mayor. Betsy, where do we go from here?
Well, I mean, obviously, if you approve these today, what we will do is, as the departments true up their strategic plans, which they're in the process of updating each one of those right now, this direction will be integrated into that. The other thing that will happen is, for instance, and I'll just use myself as an example, when I bring back my performance plan for you for next year, for your approval, it would incorporate a focus on some of these measures, ones that are key to you and key to the organization's health and success, that the manager needs to bring leadership to specifically. So we will do both of those things. Those will happen over the next 2 to 3 months. And then over the course of the year, we will monitor implementation. What most of you know is that we have a pretty robust Performance Plus system. Every 3 to 4 months, the executive team and some of the department heads get together and review all of the departmental data. Not just these measures, by the way. A lot of their operational performance metrics are evaluated in that process, including their year-to-date budget performance and a variety of other things. During that review, we will pay close attention to our performance in these key areas that you will have adopted. And then towards the end of the year, we will produce a report that shows how well we've achieved in these areas, and you'll be able to see where we measured up. One of the things that we spent some time on this year was a bit of organizational development. We worked with a gentleman named Mark Esch who really turned around the Rochester bus system, their transit system. I provided the book to all of you. I don't know that all of you have had a chance to read it. I know that Councilwoman Tarkanian gave me a quiz on it, so I know that it's of great interest. Basically what we're doing is we're taking that balanced scorecard approach that they used in Rochester and trying to apply it here to this scorecard. And I think it will yield quite a bit of data for you as we make budget decisions, as we talk about where we want to restore services, how quickly we can restore them, what it will mean, what is your return on investment. If we invest $1 million here, will you get the productivity that you want out of it? Those are the kinds of things that this helps you as a decision-making board evaluate and give me direction and our staff direction going into next year's budget.
I appreciate you bringing forward the Rochester report, because within that report it also included how the city staff, if you will, the community basically rallied around those efforts. And so having said that, what piece would our city employees play beyond the directorship of each department head?
Well, right now it's important to have that goal line, if you will, establishing a measure that people can rally around. That's part of this process, is having some really good measures that are clear, that are out there that people can rally around. Obviously, if we were going to integrate these measures into performance evaluations for employees, that would be something we would sit down with the bargaining leaders and talk about. However, we do monitor our progress in each department on those lines, and many teams use this information to really show how they put their best foot forward. It's really kind of an exhilarating process. In other areas, we've been working to enhance our ability to communicate, make it meaningful at the front line, and to create a two-way communication at those service level measures between the people that are providing that service and the managers that manage the service delivery. So we're continuing to work on that. I actually met with the CEA board earlier, last week, and we talked a little bit about that dynamic and that we need to do some work there, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to continue that dialogue.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I just wanted to add to that what Councilman Barlow had mentioned about bringing the employees into it. One of the most exciting things I thought in the book was how they brought the employees into helping to make decisions that were leadership decisions. And sometimes an employee might take a leadership role in it, whereas the administrator might not be as taking the, you have to do this or we have to do that. But it was done in a very trustworthy fashion, and it's emphasized throughout the book that you have to really accept the employees' thoughts and ideas and bring them in, and not just give lip service or eye service, but to give really full service to that. And the way he did it was very exciting, I thought. Thank you.
Councilman Coffin.
Thank you, Your Honor. There was a segment, I'm sorry, I don't have a printed copy of your scorecard. It's probably something that was given to me and I don't have. But I want to go back to infrastructure replacement in there, and it was kind of a zero-sum game. It was from 1 to 100, and I think something like in that particular category, infrastructure had a number, not that slide, but
Yeah, I'm trying. I'm
it's right close in there,
hitting the blank here.
Betsy.
Okay.
There you are.
All right. Well, I don't think this is the one you were talking about. Hold on. I think it's.
Well, that's it. That's it.
Well, we actually do have an infrastructure category here. There you go. Is that the one you were talking about?
Well, if you wanted to look at it as to all, but if you go to the slide you just showed,
Yes.
there you see a problem, I think, and that is that we have, it's common knowledge that our benefit liabilities are underfunded, and yet I think that really ought to be bumped up, and I'm not sure at what expense, because really they are directly related to fair and competitive wages and benefits. So, because I bring this up, I don't want someone to think that, well, I don't think 4 to 1 is a good ratio of your thinking. I think that there ought to be more attention paid to the unfunded benefit liability and also the infrastructure funding, because there we're way behind. We are way behind in our infrastructure. We know the numbers are staggering, billions maybe, in a corporate structure which I'm not truly sure of what the actual book value would be, but rather the replacement value, and the replacement value is huge. And our stuff's falling apart. I know the little road project that wraps into my neighborhood has been a great lesson for me. As you pierce down, as our public works people pierced on down, way down, and found things they didn't expect to find, and things that they found that weren't in as good a shape as they should have been. And it took a lot longer and more money to finish a job. That's just one little job. Well, magnify that by 1,000 and you've got the city. There's a lot of stuff like that going on. I just worry the numbers weren't adequate in terms of the attention we pay to it. Now then you go to the other the other portion of that, where you subdivided it, and funding our employee benefits for the long term, it's sometimes stated as liabilities. We're a going concern. We're not going to shut down business, so it's not like all of a sudden we have to pay off our liabilities, but still, I think the emphasis there is a little low. And I don't know where you'd take it from, because these things are essential.
That's
so
exactly what we've been struggling with. How do you distribute the point value relative to your direction and the greatest need. And what we attempted to do was interpret what we thought what we had heard. Now, what we can certainly do is look back at these two measures, the comprehensive fiscal stewardship measure. If you feel we ought to bump that up, we could certainly bump that up. You know, we could take it and have fair and competitive wages drop down a little bit, and sustain and restore services drop down a little bit, and bump up the infrastructure unfunded liabilities a little bit more, maybe by 5%, maybe 10%. We're totally open to that.
It doesn't mean you know, if you have to subtract one to add to another zero sum, it doesn't necessarily mean you don't have a feeling for employee salaries. I think our salaries are fair, and compared to the private sector, more than fair in certain ways. But I'm just very worried that we are then, by throwing such a small number on those last two categories combined, we are maybe sending a signal to our own selves. We're fooling ourselves if we think that should be, in essence, 10%. It probably ought to be closer to 40%, in my humble opinion. And then if you look at the other slide, Betsy, the next one, or the previous one, there you are. There you are. It's hard to argue with any of those, except that I think infrastructure is low there. And believe me, if you just paid attention to infrastructure, you keep your entire city staff employed for the next 100 years. So it's not like anybody's going to lose a job if you pay attention to infrastructure.
In the life safety area, we basically have a big focus on call processing and transport response, as well as making sure that our teams are on site for other hazardous situations.
Well, Your Honor, thank you. This is a dynamic thing. I brought it up. It's dynamic. I mean, just because this number appears today doesn't mean that's static for a year.
Well, it actually would be. If you adopted today, it would be. And I mean, the reason why is that it gives us a target to shoot for, and some key measures that allow us to say if we accomplished it or not. If we decide later that 10% was the wrong number, you know, then we decide 10% was the wrong number. It's really to create an index, too, so I don't know that we want to get too lost in that. At the end of the day, you're going to have a weighting that impacts the overall accomplishment in the safe and healthy city. And if some of the team members were here, many of them would tell you that these things all work together. So you've got to have optimal design and optimal conditions, roadway conditions, for instance, in order to facilitate emergency response. You know, so a lot of these things work really well together, which is why they're categorized in the same priority. You know, I'm more than happy to adjust these. If you all are interested, we can change the weight around. Just, I'm happy to take that direction, and we'll move the measures. I'm here to follow your direction.
This is not a flexible instrument?
It should be.
Well,
I mean, I would think it would be something that as we're rolling along with the punches, has some give to it, so you're responding to what the actualities are in the system and in the city.
I guess the flexibility would be built in annually, typically. We budget annually. We work, some of our projects are more than a year in duration. And one of the things we've been striving to do is to basically make sure that we're on the right track to start with. If we don't have this right to begin with, we're going to be spending a lot of time and effort in the wrong areas. If I go along and I have all of our folks working on, let me just give you an example. We have 69% of all of our resources in public safety, right, Candy? 69% of all of our resources are primarily going into that focus area. So if we're going to back that off, and I'm not suggesting you're saying that, then it would take some effort. Those would be areas that, as we're building budgets and evaluating performance, we would be you know, potentially adjusting based on that performance. Maybe it's an unrealistic target, for instance. But we would make that change at the end of the year, not along the way. That way you don't get sucked into the, oh, we're not performing well there, so we'll just say the target should have been lower. That is the kiss of death to accountability. So yes, flexibility, mid-year changes, probably not the best solution. If you guys are uncomfortable with having this kind of corporate report card, you know, that's a different kind of conversation. But what it does is it helps us know we're focusing on the right things. Because this is what I'm going to hold your executive team accountable to, trying to hit these targets.
I know we have questions up here, but looking at the chart, we are putting so much into public safety, and without public safety, you don't have a community. 35% of the 100, that doesn't seem in this reflective of that.
Right.
That our budget is much heavier going into that.
Right. That's my point. You're investing 70% of your budget to make sure that we're having a safe and healthy city. Now, recognize that you also have a very heavy capital improvement program. You have nearly a $300 million capital improvement program that's going to go into infrastructure here. Excuse me, I went the wrong direction. And into funding infrastructure liabilities. All right? So you are investing in some of those areas. What this does is it sets a target for performance for your teams, for your employees, so that we can have a goal line. One of the things that was clearly articulated in that kind of balanced scorecard approach is you have to have a goal line. If you don't have a goal line, then the employees really don't know what to shoot for. And that's kind of an unfair situation to be in, really. And it also is something that supports this move that we've talked about of transitioning our culture to one of, as Councilwoman Tarkanian said a minute ago, really empowerment and accountability. If you're really clear about the goals you're trying to hit, then it's a lot easier for an employee at the frontline level to make a decision. When they have good value sets, which you've already adopted, clear priorities and clear measures, when you're the person standing out on the park and rec field and you're having to make a decision about what you need to do, you're a lot better informed than you might be absent that data to make a good, solid decision. And that's what this is about. It's about equipping our employees. It's about excelling to perform and being held to a standard. So I don't know if that helps, but...
There were some other comments, Councilman?
Thank you, Mayor. Betsy, refresh our memories. Where do these numbers and these percentages come from?
Well, let me just show you. I've got them at the end of the thing. All right, so when we talk about thriving and sustainable business, these are the things that we're actually measuring. We're talking about the total number of new indirect and direct jobs we're creating. When we talk about our investment score, we're talking about private investment versus public investment, and the ratio of that private sector investment to the public sector investment. I'll give you an example. Everybody kind of likes the fact that we, on average, for every dollar that we spend in public incentives, we get $10 of private investment in return. Sometimes even better than that. Some years we've had about $15 in private investment. So these are the kinds of things that we're measuring to get to that overall score. It's a little, I'll tell you, it's a little risky. There are really not that many governments that are willing to hang it out there like this and say, these are the things we're really trying to do. We're trying to get more retail. We're trying to get net new businesses. We're trying to make sure that we get our business licenses issued, within 14 days. That we want our commercial plans check done within 8. But these are the things that your business community is telling us they want. And it's not unusual for us to have these kinds of things. It's just we don't typically bring them up here. We monitor these things, but we want to make sure we're on the right track with you, that these are the things that are most important to you.
Madam Mayor, I just wanted to add, I know you've done a great job, and your staff, in concentrating and doing the turnarounds for building permits and everything. And today, the meeting, just before this meeting, I met with a gentleman from California. He said that he had talked with Chris Knight about how long it would take to do certain stuff, and Chris told him 6 days. And he turned to me and he says, can you imagine 6 days? I don't know any place in the country you could get this done in 6 days. So he was very pleased, from California. And I've heard some local people say how much easier it is too, but certainly you've been very successful in that. I just wanted to tell you that.
Always good for good news. Councilman Anthony, please.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, I support these numbers here because you didn't come up with this yesterday. I mean, you've been spending a lot of time on this, not only you, but the directors, employees. There's been a lot of time and effort and process into coming up with these percentages. You just didn't pull them out of your hat. So I think the ones that I've seen are spot on. And I don't really think we can change the scorecard in the middle of the game. It would be like starting a semester at the community college and halfway through you're going to tell the students, well, I'm going to base your grade on a whole different criteria than when I told you at the beginning. So I think this is something that we should approve today, and it's something that we should that we should follow along. The one question I have for you, though, is this a report card that you give at the end, or are there periodic looks at how each one is doing throughout the period?
They're both. The answer is both. We do periodic updates. Those are typically done by the manager's team. We gauge progress. We kind of try and figure out if we're going to be able to hit our annual target. If we're not, we try and figure out why and fix it if we can. If there's extenuating circumstances, you know, who knows? And maybe this is where Councilman Coffin was concerned. We obviously may not. We are not going to perform at 100% in each of these categories. If we're performing 100% in each of these categories, we didn't set the standard right. So what we do is we try and monitor that progress towards a great score. It may be 4 stars, it may be 1 star, it may be an A, it may be a C, however we choose to judge ourselves. But at the end of the day, what we really want to see is progress. And if we're not making progress, why aren't we making progress? And is it something we can fix? If it's something we can control, maybe it's greater investment levels. Maybe it's a shift in the way we do things, where we give greater emphasis to something from an operational standpoint than maybe we have in the past. Then we adjust. At the end of the year, we evaluate that progress and we say, okay, after a year's worth of work, with this level of investment, here's what we accomplished. Some areas will do great. Some areas we won't do as well. But then that way you can look at it and say, Betsy, you know, the performance in this area maybe wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be. I'll probably be able to tell you, well, there were some things that happened along the way that we didn't anticipate. That impacted the score. That may be a good answer. It may be not a good answer. But at least you'll have an answer versus the I don't know why answer. That I prefer not to have that kind of answer for you, to be honest, ever. There's some things we can't predict, and there's some things we may never understand, but I prefer not to have those very often. So that's what we do, Councilman.
Any other councilman or woman? Any other comments? Motion?
I'll make a motion to approve item number 9.
Thank you. There's a motion. Please vote. And please post. Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Fretwell.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. And now, citizens, this is item agenda number 10. Citizen participation. Public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters within the jurisdiction of the City Council and Redevelopment Agency. No subject may be acted upon by the City Council and Redevelopment Agency unless that subject's on the agenda and is scheduled for action. If you wish to be heard, please come to the podium and give your name for the record. The amount of discussion on any single subject, as well as the amount of time any single speaker is allowed, may be limited. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak under this portion of the agenda? Hearing none, this special joint council and redevelopment agency meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.